everyone, my name is Bethany and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be telling you about all 28 books that I read in January. So I literally started the month being like, okay, I'm gonna read slower, I'm gonna read more intentionally, like let the books marinate in my brain, and then I read 28 books. So I was trying, like a lot of the books were really long, so I don't know what happened. Maybe I was just bored or I had a lot of free time, but here we go. I also started keeping track of like reading stats this month in a Google Sheet. I really love spreadsheets and like statistics and stuff. So now I'm gonna have like all the data, but the most interesting stats I thought were my average page count was 439. So that means that I didn't read all short books this month. I actually read a lot of adult books as well. So out of the 28 that I read, 11 were adult, 13 were young adult, and 4 were middle grade, which I think is pretty good. I also read a lot more genres than I usually do. It was still 50% fantasy, so obviously I still gravitate towards that, but I read 3 historical, 2 nonfiction, 2 paranormal, 2 thriller, 2 contemporary, and then 1 each in classic romance and horror, which was a new genre for me. But yeah, so I was pretty impressed with that. I think I took up track this month of whether the author was white or not so that I can see kind of how diversely I'm reading. Obviously there are other diverse statistics that I could be tracking, but that's just what I've got there for now. So 17 of the authors were white and 11 were not white, which definitely a lot of room for improvement. I also have an average rating of 4.32 for the month, which is super high. I did read 10 5-star books, really? 10 5-star books, okay, so that's really good. And I was trying to be more critical with my ratings this month as well. So there are a couple, there's 1 3, 1 3.5, a couple 3.5s actually. So I feel like I was not being super generous with the 5 stars, but I still read 10, so that's awesome. So like I did in my December wrap up, I'm gonna do this by rating so that I can talk about all my favorites at the end, because I feel like it just makes it easier for me to collect my thoughts if all my negative thoughts are together and then all my positive thoughts are together. So the only 3-star book I read this month was The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling. This was a classic that I had on my TBR because I wanted to start reading more classics this year, and I did not like it. I think it might be more like a 2-star, to be honest. I love the Jungle Book movie, so obviously I know that this is not a carbon copy of the movie, but I was kind of hoping it would be. The one saving grace of this is that it's a beautiful edition. It's like illustrated and it's got interactive elements, like maps that pull down and stuff like that. So this would be really fun to read with kids, and I just think they're so beautiful. But yeah, the stories, it's all different stories, and they were very disjointed, which is maybe the point, like it's short stories. But I just didn't like it, and there was a lot of animal violence, which makes sense because the main characters are animals. But I just hate seeing, I don't want to read about like gruesome animal deaths. Humans, fine, but not animals, I can't deal with it. So because of that alone, I gave it 3 stars. In the 3.5-star rating, I have 4 books, and only 1 of them is here physically, so I'll talk about the other 3 first. I read We Are Not Free by Kendara Blake, which is the 4th book in the 3 Dark Crown series. I gave the first book in that series 5 stars, and then I think books 2 and 3 were 4.5, and the last book I gave 3.5. So it really went downhill. I just think that you could really tell that this started out as a duology or maybe a trilogy, and then it ended up expanding to a quartet. It ended and it felt very anticlimactic, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So it wasn't terrible, it was just a little bit disappointing for like a conclusion to a series, but you know, I still liked it and I'm glad that I read those books. I was also really on a quest this month to find a thriller that made me feel the same way that Home Before Dark and The Turn of the Key did last year. So I tried In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware because it's set in like a similar, like a house, and there's people in it. Of course there's people in the house, but it's like a house setting. So what I want is a haunted house, really. But this was just fine. It was enjoyable. I read it literally in 1 sitting and I was super interested in the outcome. Kind of guessed who the murderer was, but like not super clearly, if that makes sense. So yeah, glad I read this, but it was not as good as The Turn of the Key in my personal opinion, and it just didn't scare me. So after I had tried another book by Ruth Ware, I thought, okay, I'll try some Riley Sager. So I read Lock Every Door, and I went into this one really thinking it was going to be the one that kept me up at night, and again, it just didn't. Again, the mystery was really cool. I didn't guess this one at all because it's a wacko mystery, like it's ridiculous, in a good way, I think. But yeah, it just was like not what I wanted. So that's not the fault of the book. That's why it has a 3.5 stars, but maybe it's better and I was just disappointed because I wanted a haunted house and I didn't get one. The last 3.5-star book I read was We Are Not Free by Tracy Chee. I'm trying to remember how much I like historical fiction this year, so I really want to make sure that it's kind of up there in my numbers. But this one was just not super awesome. It was very impactful, beautiful story about Japanese internment camps. I just realized I have not been giving plot summaries. At all. Okay. That's fine. I'll start giving plot summaries from now on. But yeah, so this follows, I think it's 14 Japanese teenagers at an internment camp during World War II, which is a super horrific part of history. And it just was so confusing to me. There were 14 characters, like I said, and you got all of their perspectives, and I just had no idea who was who. So I'd be reading like a really poignant piece or short story within the book, kind of, but I had no idea who it was about or how they were connected to any of the other characters. So it was good, it just wasn't amazing for me. Right, now we're moving on up to 4 stars. So these were all books that I really enjoyed. The first one is Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall. This was a nonfiction, and nonfiction ratings are hard. I feel like they're usually a 4 or 5 because I learned something, but this one was really good. It's about how basically white feminism forgets about other people who also need feminism, and it's kind of different. Like, each chapter is not really connected. It's not a narrative. It's just kind of different little vignettes, and it taught me a lot. Another one in my haunted house quest was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and this was so weird. I think one of the main reasons I didn't love it as much as I could have was that I knew a spoiler. Like, I didn't think that I was going to read this a couple months ago, so someone was talking about it in one of their YouTube videos, and I was like, I'm just going to look up the ending because I'm really curious what's happening. So I knew the twist, kind of, which made it feel really obvious throughout the whole book. It was very atmospheric. The writing was really easy to get into. It just wasn't my thing. I mean, it was my thing enough to get a 4 star. 4 stars for writing and atmosphere. That 1 star is missing my enjoyment. I also read Lux Onyx, which is the second book in the Lux series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. These are so much fun. They're basically Twilight with aliens, and I love them so much. So was Lux Onyx a great work of literary fiction? No. Did I have a wonderful time reading it? Yes. My one note that I wrote down in my reading journal, there's a character named Bethany, which I love, but during, like, someone was trying to figure something out, or if someone was who they said they were, and they thought that Elizabeth was a nickname for Bethany, and I was like, in what world is that a thing? So I was like, no. But otherwise, great book. I also read A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, which was this is one of the series on my top series to read in 2021. So I'm starting book 2 now that it's February, but I had a great time reading this one too. It is so insta-lovey. Like, literally they meet for like a week and then they're calling each other husband and wife and talking about how, like, the vampire children are her children. Is super cringy and weird. There's so much history woven into this, and I really need to go to Oxford desperately. And yeah, this is Twilight for grown-ups. So I'm on a Twilight-esque kick this month, or always. That's just my thing now. So yeah, I'm really excited to watch the show. Again, not an amazing work of art or anything, but very fun to read. Definitely. I also read Written in the Stars by Aisha Saeed. Look at this cover. It's so beautiful. I'm obsessed with it. This was a lot heavier than I thought it was going to be, and now that I'm reading the summary in hindsight, of course it was, but I didn't see it at the time. So this is about a girl named Nyla. I think that's how you pronounce her name. She is part of a conservative Muslim family who are living in Florida. She has a secret boyfriend that her parents don't know about because that's obviously forbidden, and then they find out, so they take her to Pakistan to kind of like return to the family ways. And it turns out that they've taken her there so that they can arrange a marriage, and I'm gonna stop there because of spoilers. It was super impactful. I'm gonna be thinking about it for a while. The writing was really simple, so I think that this would read really well if you're like 12, 13-ish. It would be awesome for that age range. So it wasn't like the greatest writing I've ever read, but I did really enjoy the story. Enjoy is not the right word. I was very affected by the story. And again, the cover, so can't go wrong. And now I've got Two Dark Reigns by Kendara Blake. This is book 3 in the Three Dark Crowns series. I already talked about book 4, obviously, so this one came before that. But I really like this one. It, again, was a little bit long, but I do read these really quickly. I find they're very immersive. I just really love the characters in here, and the like kind of dark fantasy setting. I think that dark YA is one of my favorite kind of subgenres. And yeah, again, still love this series. I also read A Heart So Fierce and Broken and A Vow So Bold and Deadly by Bridget Kemmerer. This is book 2 and book 3, which just came out, to the Cursebreakers series, which I read the first one in December. So that one follows a girl named Harper who is kidnapped from DC into like a fantasy world, and it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. So these just kind of expand on that story, and I can't really say too much without giving spoilers. Book 2 gets a lot of flack. A lot of reviews are really negative. It does kind of pivot to different viewpoints, and I do think that some of the character development for the characters from the first book was very weird. Like, it didn't really make sense. Book 3 helped to kind of tie it all together and bring everyone, into one plot. And I really enjoyed book 3. I flew through it. These are so much fun. So yeah, they have their problems, but I really liked reading them, and I can definitely see myself rereading these in the future. I also read Frost Like Night by Sarah Raasch, which is the conclusion to the Snow Like Ashes series. I gave the first book 5 stars, and I gave the second book, I think, 3 stars. Or maybe even 2.5, honestly, I can't remember. But I didn't like the second book, it was very boring. So I was nervous to read this one, and good news, it got a 4 star. I really enjoyed it. So the character development through this whole series is just very believable and relatable. I think also the romance plot, without giving anything away, makes total sense how it's wrapped up in the end, and I really enjoyed it. There's also a lot of messages in these books about being enough and seeing who you really are, which I loved. So yeah, I'm really happy that this last book kind of like brought it all back together, and I'm looking forward to reading Sarah Raasch's other books now. My only other comment on this series, the characters, or the narration I guess, kept saying that they gagged when they were just like either choking or out of breath. And it didn't make any sense to me. Like, you don't gag when you're like out of breath or winded. It was super weird. Every time it came up, I was like, no. But otherwise, again, great. We are on to the 4.5 star books now. So ironically, I read another book about Japanese internment camps. So this is The War Outside by Monica Hesse. I read one of Monica Hesse's books like years and years ago, and I really liked it. I think it's The Girl in the Blue Coat. But I'm looking forward to getting caught up on everything she's written recently. So I started with this one. And I liked it a lot more than We Are Not Free, unfortunately. So this follows Margot, who's a German girl, and Haruko, who's a Japanese girl, and they end up at the same internment camp in the States. I actually didn't know that any German Americans were detained during World War II, so that was really interesting to me. Their relationship was just really multifaceted and interesting to read. There's a lot of themes of betrayal and, family ties in here, and I really, really liked this. It was awesome. Just learned that the last 10 minutes were not recording, so love that. Anyway, I was just talking about my 4.5 star reads. So the next one is Crown of Bones by A.K. Wilder, which I 100% pre-ordered just because of this cover. Look at it, it's stunning. So this was a super epic fantasy that I really loved. It is young adult. The main character is a girl named Ash, but there's also kind of like, it's kind of a cast of 4 or 5 characters, I guess. The magic system in this world involves phantoms, so it's basically like a creature that you can raise that's not corporeal? How do you say that word? They're not real, but they can fight for you or heal for you or whatever kind of magic it is that you have. I really like the relationships in here. The writing was really easy to get into, and the world was easy to understand. I literally took 0.5 stars off of this because it kept graphically describing how horses died or were injured. And I just don't need to know that. I just didn't like it. It didn't add it to the story. And I didn't know why it was in there. So that's why it's a 4.5, but I'm really excited for the sequel. For romance this month, I read Dating You, Hating You by Christina Lauren, and this was everything I wanted the hating game to be. This follows Carter and Evie, who are both Hollywood agents. They meet at a party and then learn that they're going to be competing for the same job, kind of. So as they're competing, they're romancing each other, kind of, but also like sabotaging each other. So it made sense all the time how they were feeling towards each other, unlike the hating game where I didn't understand why they hated each other. It was just so much fun. It didn't get 5 stars just because it's like a pretty fluffy romance and it didn't emotionally impact me in any way. But yeah, it was so fun. I can't wait to read more Christina Lauren. A 4.5 star that I'm not going to talk about too much is The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang, because I'm going to be talking about books 1 and 3 in the Poppy War series when I get to the 5 stars. This one I just found a little bit slower. The first 300 pages I was really slogging through, and that totally could have been myself like just not being in the right mood for adult fantasy or not being able to pay attention properly. But yeah, it just wasn't as perfect as the others. So it's got 4.5 stars, but yeah, talk to you later about these. Okay, now we're on to the 5 stars, which again I have 10 of, so this is going to take a while. But I did read one 5-star nonfiction, and that is Wintering by Catherine May. I picked this up really randomly at work. It's basically just about like cozying up in winter, but it also kind of has winter as the concept of like emotional winter, like lulls in your life. It was just really beautiful to read. I loved the writing and it had some awesome messages. I wrote down a ton of quotes from this book, which is always a good sign for nonfiction. And yeah, it's a great one to read in winter especially, of course. Possibly my favorite book of the month. I think it's like, there's a top 2, and this is one of them. It's not actually a real book. Technically, it's a Harry Potter fan fiction, but I'm including it here because it was 1,100 pages long. And that's like, if you printed it out into a real book, that's how long the book would be. So this is a Harry Potter, specifically Hermione, fan fiction. Basically, Voldemort won the war, and the Order is gone, and now it's kind of The Handmaid's Tale. So you just need to read it if you're a Harry Potter fan. It's very intense, very dark, super messed up, but I cry about it like every 3 days, so it destroyed me emotionally. Still not over it. My friend Emma made me read it, and she's ruined my life forever and ever, so thanks for that. Next, I finished up the Mapmakers trilogy with The Golden Specific and The Crimson Skew by S.E. Grove. The first book is The Glass Sentence, and I read that one in December. This follows a girl named Sophia who comes from a family of mapmakers, and she's trying to find her parents. The world is definitely the best part of these stories, and I've explained it before, but it is basically there was a cataclysm, and all of the world kind of split into different time periods, so you can explore between the different time periods, but they're all set in different points in history. This quote on the back of The Crimson Skew really explains why I love these so much. It says, "Not since Philip Pullman's The Golden Compass have I seen such an original and compelling world built inside a book." It's just absolutely stunning. I think that these would be really confusing for a 12-year-old to read, honestly, because they are middle grade. But I think that they read older. Obviously, as a grown-up, I enjoyed them. But yeah, there's a lot going on. They're very complex, and I love them. I've been really wanting to watch the new His Dark Materials TV show, so I reread The Golden Compass by Philip Pullman, which is the first book. And I started the show last night, and I'm loving it so far. But this is a childhood favorite. I absolutely adore it. The first 150 pages were slower than I remembered, but the rest is just amazing. The writing is literal perfection, especially once you get to the scenes in Svalbard. Lyra is just such a real character. I'm so emotionally attached to her, and I will love these books literally forever. A book that I knew I needed to read the day it came out was Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas. So I have a signed first edition, very exciting. But this is a prequel to The Hate U Give. So if you haven't read The Hate U Give, where have you been? But you don't need to read it to get into this one. This just follows Star's father, and Star is the main character in The Hate U Give. So this I always find it a little bit harder to connect to male protagonists, which is definitely a personal failing. And I did find the writing of this one a little bit hard to get into, but again, that's completely my own thing. This is an amazing book, so impactful, so many important and beautiful messages, and it really did teach me about my own biases that are deep in there. Wish I didn't have them, but I do. And it's really helping me to dismantle them. So I would 100% recommend this. It made me cry. I was so scared reading it, and it's so good. By so scared reading it, I don't mean like a thriller. I mean scared for the characters. That sounded weird. But yeah, 100% amazing. Furyborn. Okay, I've heard so many people talk about this, and then I looked at the reviews, and half of them are like, this book is straight trash, I hate it so much. And half of them are like, I'm obsessed, this is my favorite book of all time. So I had no idea what to expect, but I'm obsessed, this is my favorite book of all time. This follows Eliana and Riel, who are two girls in a fantasy kingdom, separated by 1,000 years. There's a prophecy about a blood queen and a sun queen. It's kind of complicated, and I was confused for 30 pages, and I was worried that I was going to hate it. But then, literally page 31 to the end, I could not stop reading. It's literally everything I love in a book. It reminds me very much of Throne of Glass. One of the characters is exactly like Selena, but I love Selena, so I'm not mad about that. I'm so excited to read book 2 and 3. I just can't even explain why I love this so much. It was just really fast-paced, the characters are awesome, and please read this book. Another historical fiction was Lovely War by Julie Berry. This was Haley and Bookland's favorite book of the year, so I knew I had to read it. It's also beautiful, so that didn't hurt. But this follows 4 protagonists during World War I and II, which I didn't realize going into it. The really cool thing about this story is that it's narrated by Aphrodite, and there's some other Greek gods involved too. So it was one of the most unique historical fictions I've ever read. It made me cry, destroyed my emotions. The writing, the characters, and the story were just breathtakingly beautiful, and I'm going to be thinking about this book for a long time. Okay, finally we have The Poppy War and The Burning God. So everyone told me that this series was going to rip my heart out, and they were right. I still think that the first book is my favorite just because it was set at a school and it had training montages, and I love that crap. But this follows a girl named Rin. It's inspired by the Sino-Japanese War. That's one of my favorite things about this series, is that it's so rooted in reality. It's a fantasy series, but it's set so much in real events in history that you get to learn about. You get to learn a lot about colonization, imperialism. That's a word? Yeah, as I was talking, I was like, who? But yeah, the third book, I finished it last night, right under the gun for January, and oh my god, I stayed up past my bedtime to finish this because I was so gripped, and I never do that. So yeah, this series was amazing. I'm crushed emotionally. Again, disturbed, scarred, will not be able to stop thinking about this for a long time. That's the theme of my 5-star reads, but I'm super glad I read these. Okay, so that's all 28 books I read in January. I'm exhausted. So many good reads, so many series that I'm really excited to continue on with. Let me know if you've read any of these, and I would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Bye.